This is the Dreadful Podcast from TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Lovecraft Country, Season 1, Episode 2, Whitey's on the Moon.
You okay?
Who'd they make you see?
Doesn't matter. They're just trying to get inside our heads.
Something happened in the war. Something bad.
Don't. You know who you are. You were a good boy. And you even a better man. Don't you ever let them make you question yourself. That's how they win. They want to make us crazy. Terrorize us. Make us scared. But Letitia fucking Lewis don't get scared, do she?
No, sir.
No, that's right.
Welcome back, fellow Dreadfuls, to episode 2 of Lovecraft Country, Whitey's on the Moon. This is the Dreadful Podcast, and this is TV Podcast Industries, and I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your hosts, Derek, and yes, Whitey's on the Moon, or Whitney's on the Moon, as our screener had it named. I was really missing the point of the episode there, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was strange. All of a sudden it was like, oh no, did we quote that right in the last podcast that we had done? But
No,
nonetheless, it is definitely Whitey's on the Moon, the title for episode 2.
Yep, from the Gil Scott-Heron song that plays out towards the end of the episode. So
yeah, really interesting song about... It kind of seems to me the struggles of people, particularly black people, despite the country that they live in, having put men on the moon, and the cost of that. Yet people cannot pay for health insurance and stuff like that. So it's an interesting idea for sure, and certainly Nice choice, I think.
Definitely. This is going to be our spoiler-filled discussion about episode 2 of Lovecraft Country. If you haven't seen the episode, pop on over to HBO Max or HBO Go. Watch the episode there, or watch it over on Sky Atlantic. They have it available there on their on-demand platform as well. Definitely watch it. This is... I don't know how to say this in the best of ways. This is an entire movie squeezed into an hour.
It really is. Or it's an entire series of a TV show squeezed into a single episode, for sure.
I was thinking, if you were cutting it into ad breaks, every 15 minutes, you could probably stretch to an hour. There's so many ideas, so many concepts going on, and so many things that...
And just so much action.
Yeah, so many things you think are going to spread across the full season. They're just dealt with, lickety-split, as they'd say.
Definitely. Before we get into our spoiler-filled discussion, though, remember, fellow Dreadfuls, you can support us any way you feel, because supporting the podcast is, of course, supporting the love. You can head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com, subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, rate us, and that would be absolutely great. Or if you want to support the podcast through Patreon, you can do that through patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. And of course, we're there as well. But any support is very, very much appreciated.
Absolutely. And if you want to send in any thoughts to us about Lovecraft Country, about the season, email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with your thoughts. You can also go over to our website, as John mentioned, tvpodcastindustries.com, and leave us a voicemail with up to 90 seconds of your thoughts about the episode. Or should record an MP3 and email it to us at the email address as well. It would be remiss of us before we get into Lovecraft Country to not mention that this weekend the cancellation came in for Penny Dreadful City of Angels. We covered Penny Dreadful, all of the full season, on this very podcast, and Penny Dreadful City of Angels we just covered at the start of this year. But the official announcement came in from Showtime that we will not be getting a season 2 of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. A sad decision there, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think John Logan is certainly one of those writers, certainly from the original Penny Dreadful season 1, 2 and 3, that definitely looks to build the storyline, and you could really see the tee-ups for season 2 here. And in fact, almost season 1 was this introduction to that world, to those conflicts and battles between race, country, and family. So really interesting concept, but sadly one maybe that just didn't take off. And certainly, I suppose, with lockdown, where maybe more people were watching, possibly that factored into it. But unfortunately, we will not be getting a season 2 of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. So certainly a sad day there for sure.
Absolutely. It's a really delicate balance, isn't it, for a showrunner, because the intention would be always to go, right, we're going to do the best we can for season 1. I'm going to set up stuff for season 2. It did seem like the first season, which we did really enjoy, was absolutely there to set up a series like season 2 and season 3, that were, I'm sure, intended. There was a massive payout from LA to move the show there. So, it felt like a foregone conclusion that the show was going to get a season 2, especially with how the show was written. So a real shame, to lose that as one of the shows we're covering. But as we said, Dreadful Podcast is now the home of our sci-fi and horror podcasts, and Lovecraft Country has been fantastic. So, good start to our new horror podcast, and hopefully,
absolutely. Definitely. But without further ado, let us get on to Whitey's On the Moon, which is episode 2 of Lovecraft Country. Derek, what are some of the details for this episode?
Yep, the entire series, as we mentioned before, is based on the novel by Matt Ruff. Check that out. It's very similar in tone. It's not, it's been adapted very well, to the screen for this show. But the episode itself was written once again, the teleplay written by showrunner Misha Green, and directed by Daniel Sackheim. Daniel's a director from the 90s, gone back for doing many series, some great credits, including 2 episodes of Damon Lindelof's The Leftovers, 3 episodes of the first season of Jack Ryan, the good season of Jack Ryan, and an episode of Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, 2 episodes of Game of Thrones, 2 episodes of Ozark, John, and these are all for you because I know you liked all of these shows. He also directed 5 episodes of the original and much better run of X-Files.
I do. I mean, I so wish I was podcasting back in the late 90s. And of course, back then as well, it was on BBC 2 in the UK, and it was probably about a year out of date compared to the US before all this sort of alignment of releases globally. We came to it very late, but loved X-Files. Such a good show. Certainly the first 3 seasons. It also got a little bit sort of convoluted and a bit, dare I say it, out there, Mulder. But for sure, loved X-Files. What a great show. And verges to the director here, as we said, for bringing about coherence and it not feeling jam-packed this episode, even though it had so much going on. So really good. And of course, to the writer and showrunner Misha Green for being able to create that kind of episode that has so much, but is so coherent and moves on the whole story as you would expect from the first episode. Which, of course, is what writing does. I know I'm stating the obvious there, but it's a difficult balance to get quantity and quality in there. And that was done in spades by both the director and writer for this episode.
Absolutely. As we mentioned earlier on, it did feel like so much was in here that I thought about 20 minutes in, I paused the episode going, are we at the end? Because there seems like a massive cliffhanger, but no, it was just moving on to the next act. So, John, do you want to tell us overall what they gave us with the synopsis from HBO?
Sure. Inexplicably recovered from the terrifying night, Leti and George luxuriate in their new surroundings. While Atticus grows suspicious of their Ardham Lodge hosts, Christina Braithwhite and her elusive father, Samuel, who unveil cryptic plans for Atticus's role in their upcoming Sons of Adam ceremony. Later, after Tick, Leti and George stumble upon a clue that could lead them to Montrose, each takes an unwelcome walk down memory lane. I think the Grand Lodge as well also takes a huge sort of unwelcome walk down memory lane as well, with its destruction by the end of this episode. And we hear in this episode as well that it also was rebuilt from another devastating event, which was a big fire back in, the 19th century.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff going on in this episode. Some stuff that I wonder whether the earlier scenes are meant to make you question whether any of it is real. By the end of the episode, I'm sure I will definitely be talking about that at my point as I go into it later on. But can we quickly just talk about that wonderful opening for the episode? The Jeffersons kind of referencing this. The Jeffersons was a 70s TV show all about a couple that get wealthy and move to the East Village, I think it is, in New York. So they're moving on up effectively.
Yes.
They've moved to an area where at the time it would have been very difficult for for black families to live in that area because it was a completely white area. This is exactly what's happening at the beginning of the episode. We see Letitia and George going into their rooms, getting filled up with their dreams, effectively. You've got Letitia having a whole wardrobe. You have Letitia with a whole wardrobe full of clothes that fit her like a glove. You've got George sitting in a room with a library of every one of his favorite books, all to this theme from the Jeffersons, the moving on up, which just think it's so joyous as a moment. And then, as it cuts to Atticus, he knows something's wrong here. It's a really good scene.
Definitely. And I think that brings me on to my kind of main point here, because yes, despite everything looking sort of rosy, there is an underlying current here at the Ardham Lodge here. Mm-hmm. And part of that is, soon after they have woken up, they are given a tour of the surroundings and the lodge by creepy butler or brother William Braithwhite. Mm-hmm. It may not actually be a Braithwhite, but certainly he has the blonde hair, blue eyes, slightly Teutonic look about him that would say he's not fallen far from the apple tree in that sense.
I really hope he's not a Braithwhite, because we do hear that he's a boy and a friend of Christina, suggesting that he is not a member of their family, I hope. But he's definitely not a butler either.
Well, no, that's true.
Very close personal friend is his description.
But he's almost like a valet for sure. He's certainly organizing, making sure everyone's in the right place at the right time. Yeah. But he gives George, Letitia, and Atticus this tour of the lodge, and there is this picture of Titus Braithwhite, the founder of this lodge, looking a little clanny with the hood, although not in white. And what we do here is that he made his fortune from shipping. And I do like Letitia's little whisper to George in his ear saying, this is code for slavery. Uh-huh. This is white code for slavery. And then we hear of this moment that he was also kind to his employees as well. Again, another code for slavery. But I think this is kind of important, because at the time this is happening, it is more just the general feeling by Atticus is, when have white people kept black people in their house, in their home, on their property, rather than trying to get rid of them off it for, within the first second of meeting them. Mm-hmm. And so this is all very weird to them. And there's an idea that they are being held here against their will, which they are as we move through this. There's a lot of magic involved in this episode, with spells, sort of retaining spells, keeping them in their rooms. There is the moment where they do try to escape, and those classic North American covered wooden bridges where it feels like they're going to cross the county line, and there is another sort of restraining field of magic with that symbol that glows that stops the car crunching it up.
Oh, that car crash is so cool.
It's really well done.
It's just that invisible barrier. You're trying to work out how it's done. Is it done with CGI? Did they crash a car and remove a green screen that they crashed into or something? Is it something like that? But it just looks so cool.
It is,
and it's so unexpected, the way it comes at that moment. So unexpected that it's about to happen. Yeah.
Exactly. But all these things that William has provided to the three all come back with George. He has this recollection in the woods. Again, we get the return of the Shoggoths. Mm-hmm. But just before that, there's almost this recollection that George has about a relative, a distant relative named Hannah. And that this is part of the reason why Montrose has actually been used then as bait to bring Atticus. technically, I think Letitia and George really shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And it is Atticus that they're after because this order of the Ancient Dawn, the Sons of Adam, founded by Titus Braithwhite, his heirs include Atticus. And it seems that he had brought into his employ, into the lodge, Hannah, which is one of Atticus's long lost relatives. And so Atticus has the blood of Braithwhite in him, Titus Braithwhite in him.
I love, George's realization that that's what that all means. That he's known to be very friendly and and treats his staff really well. Oh, that means he got one of the slaves pregnant.
Yes, exactly.
That's a really interesting revelation here. I love how George is kind of piecing it all together. This idea that he had a conversation once with Atticus's mother, and she told him about the fact that one of her ancestors was a slave and had escaped from the lodge. That she told George about it, but didn't tell Atticus and his father Montrose about it because she was embarrassed of that being part of her history, effectively. So, but it comes back to George, and I think it works really well in the episode itself, probably because they have pieces of their mind and their memories being taken out by this spell that's being put on them. It feels totally understandable that some other piece of memory might come back to George in a moment when they're being attacked by the Shoggoths. This opening section of the episode where we find out that both Leti and George don't remember anything of that Shoggoth attack. It's only Atticus that remembers because they have a spell on them, blocking the attack from their memory,
Yeah.
And then the hilarious scene where Atticus tells Christina to remove the spell, and you just hear the screams from both rooms as they realize what's happened.
Good.
Really
exactly.
perfect timing. Great comic timing.
Definitely really good timing.
What do you think about the use of all the spells in here? I must just quickly, before I ask you the answer to that, but I loved Atticus's line about, the clan have moved from just being grand wizards to being actual wizards now. This is a really good laugh there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it is, and you get that moment with Christina where she says, "My father would never fraternize with the clan; they're too poor." But ultimately, the Sons of Adam are very, very white. They are very, very male, and they are very, very middle to old age as well. And this is, in a sense, the clan in all but name.
Well,
in a sense, you have this really interesting moment where there is a guy having his liver or kidney extracted on the table, and Atticus is brought in here, and it's all fairly plays quite on the level, and in the end we realize that this is Samuel having his liver or kidney taken out. I suppose it must be his kidney, because you can survive with one kidney. He would be pretty knackered if he just had his liver taken out.
He certainly wouldn't be drinking any wine with dinner.
But then the magic of this family suggests that he could grow it back, or something would happen, because and we have this moment where he is talking about this painting on the wall. It says by an artist called Tannhauser, and it's this painting of the Garden of Eden, and it's all about how Adam was involved in creation, setting the order, putting, as Atticus says, putting everything in its place, that hierarchy. And the suggestion is that then that evil mistress Eve came and spoiled everything, and everyone went into their tribes, their races, their countries, and it basically blew up the whole concept of the Garden of Eden, this order, this structure, this hierarchy, and I suppose the peace that they see comes with that. And
as usual there, the blame that's in this story is to Eve. Eve comes along and she's the one that blew it up. She's the one that ruined it. That's why women aren't in their organization. It's Adam was involved in creation. It's not that he was the first created and Eve was the second created, as most people would think from Bible stories. This is the idea that Adam was not an equal of God, but was a
co-creator almost
with God. Exactly.
Even to the point where he uses his rib to form Eve, that sense of why Samuel in this moment is giving of his kidney, or liver, whatever it may be.
But I do love that Christina calls that out as well. This idea of anybody who takes any kind of literal stories from those tales from the Bible, there's something wrong with them. Surely all the people in this room are smart enough to know those are just tales and stories to inspire us. They aren't real stories. They aren't anything true, and gives her father a bit of a look. But you can tell from his response to her that he's not happy that this would be her impression. We do hear later on that that is actually Samuel's impression. He says he's not a zealot. He said he doesn't believe in any of this stuff. His belief goes far enough in the fact that these people believe there is magic in the words. These people that are members of this group, they all believe there are magic in the words. As long as they believe, and as long as they put the money in, as long as they put the support in, well, then he's also going to speak through scripture.
Yeah, he says he's not a zealot, basically. Yeah. And coming back to your point, I really liked the magic here. I think it was another thing that elevated or accelerated really quickly. Mm-hmm. I wasn't expecting them to see these forces of magic, these restraining fields. There's a lot of spinning you around 50 times and seeing whether you can find the door in this episode as to what's real and what's not. So, I mean, you have all these dreamlike sequences after the three have come back from the village, trying to find out if Montrose is maybe held prisoner in the village. And you know, they're all visited by different people, maybe that they want to see, you know, so there's some idea that they have a connection or they can connect with these people. Mm-hmm. Atticus is visited by a Korean woman soldier that he has to kill because she's attacking him. Yeah. George by his ex-wife or his former wife who's died. Yeah. And he is the one that knows this it isn't reality, but he goes along with it just for those few extra moments with his former wife who's passed away. Yeah. And then you have Letitia who's visited by Atticus, and things get relatively ramped up and steamy very quickly here. This idea of the so far the unspoken love to Atticus by Letitia. Mm-hmm. So
you did get your what you asked for, John, last week. You were looking for more Atticus without a shirt. You got him without shirt and pants this time.
Well, it was a snake willy, which I like Letitia, I would be screaming the house down and trying to go for a knife if that was visited upon me. For sure.
One thing about the Atticus memory, I think, is what's happening with him, because he comes out of the room and says to George, I did bad things in the army. There's something that I did that I need to talk about. And George says, look, don't worry about it. You were a good boy when you were young. You're a good man now. No matter what you did in the army, that was for the government. That was for doing your job in the army, effectively. So what it feels like in Atticus' case, as opposed to the other two, it feels like he's getting visited by something that actually happened to him. He was attacked and ended off brutally killing the Korean soldier that he killed. But it is something that actually happened to him, it seems. It seems that it played out the same way. I think that's quite interesting, because we did hear from earlier on when Leti and George are kind of disbelieving what Atticus is telling them about what happened in the past. They're saying, oh, you know, people come back from war and they have these things that are going on in their mind that may not actually be happening in real life. This is just post-traumatic stress kind of thing, is what they're saying about Atticus. And he's saying, I'm not going through any of that yet. This experience that he has in the house seems to suggest that he has got some post-traumatic syndrome or some kind of syndrome after being in the war.
For sure. And I think the great thing about George as well is he brings them all together. This is trying to undermine us. It's trying to undermine you. You know who you are. You're all good people. And he's absolutely fantastic. You can see Letitia really shook up by her experience, and he really kind of gets her to get a grip effectively. And
favorite speech in the episode.
It is really, really nicely done.
Really like George. Yeah. Oh, we'll get there.
We will. Yeah. George is excellent. And even to the point that with this whole thing, it is that Samuel wants to use Atticus. The reason why he's been brought here, the reason why him being an heir to Titus Braithwhite, Samuel says it really, awfully in that, yes, you have the blood of Titus in you, even though it may be diluted and tainted. It's just really, all for the purpose of this ceremony that will take place. And it's all to try and enter to the Garden of Eden, to bring back this order that the Sons of Adam and the Ancient Dawn Order is trying to do.
Yes, or to paraphrase Atticus, to put everything back into its right place, which is what seems like the plan from Samuel. Yeah, I don't want to sound like we missed the point of the episode. Definitely, it's completely clear in the episode that the clan are one thing that black people in America at the time are scared of and should be scared of, especially in the towns and cities that these three are traveling through, Letitia, George and Atticus. But what's very clear in this episode is there's also the underlying very rich, very white, very quiet people that also have it in for black people in America, that are absolutely believe that they're a different type of being to these Americans, these rich white Americans as well. It's very clear in the episode there's also those types of people. It also underlines something there with Christina, who you believed from when we saw her in that one scene in the first episode, and some of the scenes in this episode, you kind of believed that she was on the side of Atticus and his team. It's very clear here she may be not willing to be as bad as Samuel, but she also doesn't speak up when she has the opportunity to stop something really bad happening, which happens in this episode where Samuel takes out his gun and shoots Letitia and then takes his gun and turns it on George. Christina does nothing and is asked by Atticus to step in. She does nothing. It's very clear that these are all things that the show is conveying about the experience of black people in the 50s of America.
Absolutely. I think Christina is kind of a really interesting character. And I think just my final kind of sub moment from this is I think there's a really nice little moment between Christina Braithwhite and Atticus. It's after he has agreed to willingly take part in this ceremony because they failed in their escape at the bridge. Yeah. And in order to persuade Atticus, Samuel has shot Letitia and also has shot George. And if he goes through with this, it's on the promise that he will bring George, well, he will help George to recover from the gunshot. And we see that Letitia also has been helped. We see her recover fully with no bullet wound or anything. So it's, you know, this another magical element here. But there's a really nice moment where Atticus is being prepared fully in the buff to for the robes for this ceremony, and he's been given a ring by Christina.
Yeah,
and she again it harks back to this order of things. It harks back to how prejudice is on so many different levels, whether it is to do with sex, sexuality, whether it's to do with race, culture, body shape, whatever it may be. And, you know, she's there and she gives him this ring that is worn by, all the men, in the order. It's this almost like an NFL Super Bowl ring. It kind of identifies, them as part of, the order of the Ancient Dawn and the Sons of Adam.
And it has that same symbol that was on all the magic, magic experiences. What would you call them?
Yeah, there's kind of like a rune. It's almost like a rune that glows to have the magic sort of active.
Exactly.
And you know, she gives him this ring to wear, and she says, "I can never have one of these, no matter how much I try, because I was born a woman. Whereas you get one for just being born a man." And it's a really interesting thing. And it kind of speaks to the complexity of perspective and different viewpoints, in the sense that as a woman, even though she's a white privileged woman, she sees that she can never have one of these. She can never be fully ordained, I suppose, in the Sons of Adam because she's female. Whereas he is one up in the pecking order of being male, so can be on the basis he was, like a monarchy, born with Titus Braithwaite's blood.
Well, yeah.
But
he doesn't want it.
But he doesn't want it. Yeah. And also, in the scheme of the Sons of Adam, when they're having their meal to celebrate his arrival and the promises that can come from this ceremony, they're all very much disdainful of both him and George.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's these relative positions in this order that was spoken to about by Samuel, in effect, that are created, you know, kind of almost enforced by society through their biases, their prejudices, or their outright isms, whatever that ism may be.
Yeah.
It just was a really interesting conversation because it just speaks to the complexity of so many of these different things. And yet you would say in the show as a whole, she is in a better position than Atticus.
Definitely.
She is.
Yeah.
But in that moment, she feels she's not. And it's just a fascinating look at, just the whole complexity of viewpoint and perception, I think, on this.
I think you've heard me say it a million times now, John, because one of my favorite phrases are, my problems are worse than yours because they're my problems. And that's exactly what we have here with Christina. She believes that she's lower in the pecking order because she can't be a full part of this society when she wants to be. Yet, of course, Atticus would trade everything to just get back in the car with his family and go home. He doesn't want to be anywhere near this situation.
He would give her that ring in a heartbeat if she allowed him and helped him to escape.
Yeah. This is wonderful moments in this episode and really strong moments for all the characters. But kind of leads me on to, I suppose, to the end of the episode. Let's take it out into how it all resolves, I suppose. So Atticus is only being involved in the ceremony because his family members have been shot. So we have Letitia, who's been shot, and she is saved, but it seems like they're holding over George. They're allowing him to bleed out until the successful completion of this ceremony, and then they'll save him. That's what it seems like to me anyway. I'm not sure. We don't see him get up and check for the wound or anything like that, but we see Letitia's wound has actually been cured, and she looked like, well, she was definitely the one that looked dead when she was shot. We didn't actually see George getting shot. So what was the resolution supposed to be here? You know, if they had attained this bridge to Garden of Eden, brought forth the past and changed the world completely, and then they were going to go upstairs and save George, was that what was going to happen? I couldn't really understand. If they'd been successful, it seemed like the whole world would have been changed, is what it felt like.
To be honest, I don't really know what would have happened in opening this portal to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
I'm really quite unsure what was going to happen to either the world in which they lived or the world on the other side, or whether it was simply just a portal that you could move through and between the two different times
pick up a unicorn
spaces.
Or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to know, but I think the deal was, I mean, we have Christina saying, whatever you think of my father, he's a man of his word. So you kind of, on the basis of that, take it that he probably would have helped George. The thing is, everything goes south really quickly in this ceremony, because whether it's Atticus doesn't know how to control the powers that he has, or whether it's the influence then of his relative Hannah that he sees through this portal, his relative in a housemaid's uniform in the lodge, pregnant, and all of a sudden, you get the house and the lodge shaking and shuddering and beginning to dismantle.
So I need to talk about this bit, because this is going to be a lot of speculation. But I need to talk about the ceremony itself. So it seems like there was a lot of thought beforehand that this might work, that by using the blood of Atticus, despite the fact that he's a long descendant and not directly part of the family, that this could work. Is what we keep hearing. As the kind of spell is going on and the room is filling up with light in the room, it seems like everything's going positively. And then you see the ring affecting what's going on. You see a black smoke coming out of the ring, mixing with the light side, it seems. And
the energy that seemed to be coming
from
through Atticus from the white orbs.
Yeah.
Was hitting, and you had plants coming into the world, and it all looked fairly Disney. And then, yes, the ring begins to kind of get smoky black around it.
Yeah.
Atticus sees Hannah in the gateway, and then it's like whether he can't control it or whether
he did control it.
He did control it. which was not what Samuel was expecting, because part of me is there kind of thinking, is not Samuel, Christina also have the blood of Titus in them? And so that they assumed that Atticus probably would die in this moment or be sacrificed. It was more of a sacrifice. Yeah. So, and they didn't want to risk it with them. So
remember, Christina can't be included because Atticus is a son of a son.
Yes.
Actually, Atticus is a
son of sons.
Actually, Atticus is a son of a mother who's connected through the ages. So that's why he's slightly separated. We hear that Samuel is a son of a father. So his father's side is connected back through the ages. So that's why there's a separation there. Christina is a daughter of a son. Yeah. So that's why she's disconnected, but she couldn't be included because she's a daughter. Atticus can be included because he's a son, even though it's of a mother. But anyway, my big question, I suppose, my speculation here is that it is the ring that causes the end to this ritual, killing Samuel, it seems, turning him to dust and putting the property, the Ardham Lodge, to ruin. And that ring is the ring given to him by Christina. So perhaps Christina is on his side. Perhaps Christina did tamper with this whole thing.
Yeah, could be. I hadn't thought of that, actually.
The whole plans of her father, because she couldn't be allowed in the society, or because she doesn't believe in what his plans were. Just wondering, because of that moment, it does seem like the ring is affecting it, and the ring came from Christina with that specific speech. So that's what it feels like. Was she involved possibly? But as you say, he is led out of the building, by Hannah, his ancestor. And that's so interesting.
It's really
that scene,
cool.
You see the fire on her side, which is how she would have escaped from the house when the house was originally set on fire and burning to the ground. And she's leading to the front door. And as she's going to the front door, you kind of see the current experience that he's going through of the whole building collapsing behind him as he goes.
It's so good.
Really well directed.
Really like this whole kind of vision of how they did that and connecting him to his ancestor in that way. I thought that was really beautifully done. And
in a violent and destructive way.
And I mean, speaking of ancestors as well, the interesting thing here is that Montrose, his father, has been found in the village. And, when we mentioned about their escape, that was with Montrose in hand, even though he was pretty ungrateful being found. Why have you come here? It is a trap kind of thing.
Did you get a little vibe of Indiana Jones?
Yeah, exactly.
I sent the letter as far away as I possibly could to get to you.
Exactly.
Why the hell did you bring it back here? Kind of thing. Yeah.
And speaking of family and then relatives, with effectively Montrose, his brother George, there's Atticus then, which is Montrose's son, Uncle George there as well, plus this whole hereditary thing back to Hannah. It's really interesting because what we find here is potentially George is Atticus's father. It's not confirmed, but there is the discussion between him and Montrose where Montrose and his brother are kind of catching up, saying, you used to paint, Montrose. Why did you stop that? And he said, my father's left hook. And George kind of moves this on, saying, you need to give your son love. You get the whole thing of, don't tell me how to raise my son. Yeah. And he goes, well, he could be mine. And they say, we put that argument to rest a long, long time ago.
No, he said he might not be yours.
Yes.
Didn't say it could be mine, so I'm not sure whether George is saying that he could be the father, or potentially there is another member of the Braithwhite family that could be his father. But you're right, there is a question over Montrose being his father, definitely, as to whether it's George or whether it's
But there is an implication,
else.
It's implied a bit. Yeah. Given how he reacts to George. Yeah. And I think for me, I like that implication because it fed into me, my reaction then to George's, having died in the car after Atticus has come out, because I thought that scene as well was absolutely phenomenal. I think Jonathan Majors, who plays Atticus, I loved how, just he emoted that distress and sadness and bereavement, that initial bereavement there of his Uncle George. I just thought it was phenomenally good. And I think also realizing in that moment that possibly, even though he doesn't know it, he could be bereaving his actual father. Yeah. Again, with this show, who knows? Maybe George isn't really dead, or there is another way that Atticus, like he saw Hannah, is able to tap into these different time streams and timelines as well.
Yeah, perhaps. And, as I said earlier on, it does seem to be putting you off balance the whole way through. That's kind of the overarching part of my point is, what the hell happens next? This whole episode seemed to be setting up this family of the Braithwhites. And if I understand rightly, we've just lost the patriarch of that family, possibly also lost his daughter Christina in that collapse of their entire house, their entire history collapsing into the ground again. Does this episode end and then next week the team that's left, Atticus and Letitia and Montrose, do they go around the country now, looking into the houses of all of the rest of the Sons of Adam or the group themselves and shutting all of those down now that they know they're available? George mentions there are places like this all across the country. Is that, is it like Supernatural now where they run around the country taking out these houses? Or does it come back next week and actually this didn't collapse? This was part of the ceremony. This is something that was going on in Atticus's mind. I'm interested to see what happens in that next week. Also, now that you say it about possibly George being the father of Atticus, was the woman that visited him for his dance, was that his former wife who'd passed away, or was that Atticus's mother? Because we don't know anything about Atticus's mother yet at all. We don't know her name, or Montrose's wife at all. We don't know her name. So is it possible that that's who visited George when they were having their dream dance?
Yeah, it really could be. I think there's still a lot to explore here, and I think that's the great thing. Despite whizzing through an episode with so much action that could actually have been a full season, in terms of how it could have been drawn out. And yet there's still so much around the Braithwaite family, around the Freeman family, and that history. Or are they going around all the different lodges, or is there still a lot to do here in Ardham County? So it'd be
not
really
a lot to do in Ardham House.
Well, certainly not, but it'd be interesting because if they can do this magic, can they just rebuild the lodge quite quickly? Are the Braithwaites really dead? I think just quickly as well, in terms of George passing there in the arms of his brother Montrose, I thought the song Rivers that was playing there, by Leon Bridges, was just a really great choice. I think the music across this show so far has just been really on point. I've really enjoyed the mix of different styles, different eras being used within this show so far.
Absolutely. Was that Mark Lanigan's version of Bad Moon Rising that we had in there as well?
I think so. It certainly sounded like his voice.
Yeah, it really did. So some of the music in this episode, you're right, was really, really good. I think that's it for the majority of the show. We're going a little bit over where we intended to go in time for this episode because so much happened, and we kind of set up our idea that we'd be doing like 30 to 45 minutes about these episodes, and then we saw the episodes and went, oh my God, there's so much to cover in here. But a couple of little kind of touches, I suppose, to kind of take us out of the episode. Some kind of references and things that feel like they were inspirational in how this episode was set up. A couple of things I noticed. It felt like that scene with the dance between George and the lady, possibly his former wife, where the Nat King Cole song playing, that really felt like a touch of The Shining in there. That felt like,
definitely,
that those moments where you're hearing this music from a really old time, and this, just the setting of the estate that they're effectively in was, just felt like the kind of Shining, setup. Definitely felt a moment of The Wicker Man when they go and visit the village, and we have the kids playing with what looks like a wicker woman. What I noticed with them was they were dancing around with pieces of cloth. So the cloth was almost exactly the same color as the clothes that Letitia was wearing. And because I have that in my head about Wicker Man, I'm kind of going, is this like foreshadowing the fact that she dies later on in the episode? Is this foreshadowing that she is doomed at some point later on in the season?
Yeah, well, it was that, and also the idea of the maypole dance as well, because they were kind of dancing around, crossing the ribbons of that cloth. And also just the village itself was like, you've got Charlemagne's The Village, but that classic horror trope, as we mentioned in the previous episode, the story of the unwelcome visitor, where they are welcomed, but things seem off. As you say, it's the village, looks like time has stood still. Mm-hmm. It's to the point where George and Atticus and Letitia notice that the stone building is the building that's out of place.
Yeah.
Is this the jail? What is this? This is the place where they go for safety at night. Because all the other houses are wattle and daub and thatch roofing and just the disconcerting behavior of being out of time. And then certainly the racist undertones from the lady with her Black Bear story as well.
Yes,
you know,
not like her very much.
It was it was really kind of creepy, which I think those kind of stories always are, that being out of time, for sure. And you do hear that same high-pitched whistle from her when she's trying to control her two dogs, which sounded the same as the whistle used to control the Shoggoths, which we do see being used here by Christina as the Shoggoths do reappear. We also find out that Shoggoths are born from cows.
Yes,
so
do.
that's an interesting concept, very alien-like in that sense.
Yeah.
You know, the host. Although in this case, it didn't eat its way out of the cow. So it was a much more normal birth, shall we say.
Yeah.
And the cow did seem to survive.
It's still very freaky when everybody around the cow is smiling as if it's just giving birth to a little calf, and you're seeing these razor sharp teeth coming out the back end there. That was really interesting. You made the reference to M. Night Shyamalan's Village. I think that definitely stood there in the town, because it feels, even though it's the 1950s, the town or the village that's around the lodge feels so much older than that. Feels like everybody there is in houses that don't really belong there. It just feels kind of odd, but yeah, I like that. It's another horror reference that kind of unsettles you throughout the episode. Maybe that's the reason why it feels like we have so many different things going on in this 1 hour episode of a show, that there's loads of those unsettling things that are in various movies that we've seen.
Yeah, definitely. Also, Montrose's escape is reference to Count of Monte Cristo, this, escaping his stone cell, and digging through. I loved when he came out as well. You know, he's got his hands raised in the air. He's made his escape. He's come to freedom. And you just have Atticus, Letitia and George come over going, "Hi, Montrose. Right, let's go. Yeah. Let's get out of here."
And it looks like it took him weeks. Like he broke through the stones in the wall and then dug his way all the way out underneath the field there as well. You know, I think that's also a reference to the Roots, or I think we saw it in Django Unchained as well. The clasped hands coming out with shackles on them from underground. You know, I think we've probably seen that in many films about escapees during the slavery times as well. Definitely seen that as an image that's used there. So it was a really evocative image, but you're right, the kind of tension undercut with everybody arriving and with Letitia going, "Let's just get out of here, get in the car. I don't care whether you wanted us here or not. We're here. Let's go," kind of thing. Really interesting. Anything else about the episode that we want to cover before we close it off, John?
No, not from my side.
Okay. Well, overall then, what did you think of the episode, John?
For me, another really great episode. I would give this 4.5 pieces of liver with a nice Chianti out of 5. I think, and in reference to that, I loved the way Atticus says, "Don't eat that, George." And
I'll have the Chianti.
Yeah, exactly. It was really good. I thought there were some really interesting moments in this. I loved just that brief conversation between Christina and Atticus over the ring. I thought that was just, again, it's just that nice depth to the episode and to the series so far. I think the whole Atticus and the destruction of the lodge and being brought out, that connection to his ancestor Hannah, seeing that done the way it was done with the fire for Hannah and the collapsing building behind Atticus was just so good. George's death was really emotional. For a character, if he is dead, for a character after 2 episodes, wow, what a character he was. I loved him. He felt like the heart and soul of this trio. The man who read the books, the thinking man, the man who would take people out of their despair or worry or doubt and say, "You know who you are." Man full of confidence in himself, yet also a party to anxiety and misdeeds.
Yeah.
Just really great character.
Absolutely.
And I'm really hoping Atticus can use whatever that power he seems to have running through him to open up the portal to the Garden of Eden so that he can maybe bring George back to life and heal his wounds like Samuel had done with Letitia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But just so much going on, but all of it really meaningful, absolutely at the right pace. Yeah. Despite feeling like I'd gone on a whirlwind, it all made sense, and I just can't wait to see where we go next. So absolutely another great episode. And 4.5 livers and a nice Chianti out of 5 from me.
Absolutely. Just, you do wonder how much strength the character of George must have had. Remember, he's the one that wrote this book, giving the guide to getting round America safely for black people in the 40s and 50s. You know, how much strength must you have to visit all of the places that you don't feel safe, that you don't put on the list so that you can tick them off the list, I suppose. Like, he must have put himself into so many scary situations in his life to get himself to be able to do this book or pamphlet that's able to guide people to safe living and safe travel across America. Yes, a really sad loss, but you're right. You know, the fact that we lost Leti early on in the episode, she's so strong, such a powerful character. And I couldn't believe that you would take this character away 2 episodes in, and then they bring her back and get rid of the bullet wound and save her later on in the episode. And then maybe because they did that is the reason why we're both questioning, is George dead? Will he be back next episode? But their mission so far for these 2 episodes was to get, Atticus's father and bring him back with them, get Montrose and include him in the team. And now they've got Montrose, they've lost George. So, you know, is it just going to continue with Montrose being at loggerheads with Atticus and with Leti as they go on the next trips? You know, I really have no idea what to expect next week, but I am hoping for a last minute save for George. But a really, really good episode this week. So much to talk about. Definitely. So if you want to talk to us about anything that you've seen in the episode, anything we didn't talk about or anything you want to talk about, email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. We have spoiler posts up there for each episode of the season, and you can just leave your thoughts in there. Or, as I say, you can email us, or you can email us a voicemail of your thoughts on any of the episodes so far. We have a voicemail in from our good friend Steve Brown about his thoughts on the first episode of Lovecraft Country.
Hey, John and Derek, this is Steve. This is for Lovecraft Country. Episode 1 was crazy, man. I loved it. I really did. I'm all in on this series. I was a little hesitant when it started with the kind of real kind of hokey kind of special effects. And I was like, wait a minute, this has got to be a dream somebody's having. And then, of course, it was him dreaming he's, himself in the John Carter series. So that was great. And then at the end, I don't know H.P. Lovecraft. I've not read his stuff, so I don't know the exact monsters that we're dealing with here and stuff. But that was really cool to see those monsters, and especially I'm hesitant to say anything about the whole racism situation because I'm a middle-aged white man, but I think they're doing a very good portrayal of what was going on in that day, and it makes me feel bad for this country. It makes me feel bad that in some respects this country has not gotten better either. So anyway, I loved the ending. I can't wait to see where we go from here. And if you guys are going to cover this every week, I'm with you because I'm in.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. A very happy 50th birthday to Steve Brown.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I know he's been celebrating all month for his birthday as well. So glad we can be part of that with bringing you through Lovecraft Country. So cheers, Steve.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for the feedback. It's really good to hear you. And to be honest, I not that you were having the odd tipple there for Lovecraft Country, but certainly I needed a few stiff drinks, certainly to get me through that Shoggoth bit, as well as some of the horrific stuff in Sundown counties. It's a really great show, as you say, and I think I H.P. Lovecraft. It's more not that I've read specific books, maybe one or two, but it's the overarching sort of influence from his pulp fiction, but particularly the Cthulhu mythos, that is so dominated, through, I suppose horror genres, but even wider than that. I mean, even say something like Stranger Things, that beast in the Upside Down world.
Yeah, definitely.
It's coming from Cthulhu.
Definitely inspired by Cthulhu. Yeah, Cthulhu would be, multi-armed, massive teeth, huge mouth beast that comes to take over the entire planet. That's kind of the size level you're talking about, So even that little one that's in the dream in the first episode looks like a small version of Cthulhu to what's in my mind. But thanks so much, Steve, for your thoughts. Looking forward to hearing more of them as the season goes on. Send them in every week and we'll play them on the next episode that we're recording.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. And thank you so much, fellow Dreadfuls, for joining us. We hope you stay subscribed to the podcast. And if you enjoy what you hear, of course, why not share it with your friends? Sharing the podcast is sharing the love. We really like to get your feedback and support. So please, rate us, subscribe, leave a review. That is great. And of course, we will be back next week with Lovecraft Country Season 1, Episode 3. Spectacles, testicles, wallet and watch. No, sorry, the Holy Ghost.
There you go, John. There you go. Yes, thanks so much. Yeah, we're looking forward to getting back to Lovecraft Country next week and entering the darkness once again. On our main feed over in TV Podcast Industries, we'll be wrapping up Umbrella Academy Season 2, and we'll be getting ready for The Boys Season 2 coming up at the start of September. So loads and loads of stuff to join us for. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much, fellow Dreadfuls. As always, it is a pleasure speaking with you. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and as those Shoggoths appear in the woodlands, keep screaming.
Bye.
Bye.